Well, new research conducted by Small Business Australia shows an alarming number of small businesses are on the brink of going bust, with new calls for government intervention. Here to tell us more is Small Business Australia's Bill Lang. Bill, good morning to you. These are some seriously concerning statistics. Almost 500,000 Aussie businesses on the brink of collapse.
Yes, that's right, Alana. And if you think about COVID-19, it's been running now for 8 or 9 months. There's been changing levels of certainty, uncertainty, different approaches in different states. A lot of people are at the end of using their savings. They've already sold some assets and they've really got to make a decision. Is there any sort of light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I think this is the thing, isn't it? We all sort of expected to come into 2021 and have the bulk of this behind us. But as we can see, there's still border wars going on. We're having a lot of, mini lockdowns, I guess you would call them. The government did put forward some considerable support, but now in light of this fight not being over, what are small businesses wanting from the government now?
Yeah, well, look, it very much varies by the location, the size of the business and the type of the business. But if we take an area like the tourism sector, no international visitors, increasingly no one from interstate, the Christmas period being a key period, but then we've had significant issues far north Queensland, border areas. These are the times of the year when most of those businesses make most of the profit they would normally make, and that's been absolutely hammered. So we need something more tailored, a bit smarter with respect to what assistance does a particular business and industry need, rather than just broad-based national approaches, like JobKeeper.
Yeah, well, that's right, which we know is set to end anyway, and potentially that does need to get re-looked at, doesn't it? But also from a small business perspective, when we're talking about tourism in particular, some new stats just released. This was part of an article on The Australian this morning, saying in the 2 weeks since Christmas Eve, tourism revenue across the nation has dropped $3 billion compared with the same period last year. How hard is it for these small businesses to actually plan when things are really changing week to week, day to day?
Well, it's incredibly difficult. And if you think about the expenses of those sorts of businesses in that sector, like rent doesn't go away, paying the property loan for your premises doesn't go away. You may have been getting some support with respect to a little bit of help from JobKeeper, but the expenses are still there. And we've got a lot of these businesses where the owners, in terms of themselves being able to pay for their own personal bills, have drawn into their savings. They've been tapping into their super. We've had 93,000 businesses actually have to sell real estate to keep the businesses going so far.
Yeah, it's so hectic, isn't it? And I think, we all want to do what we can to help. And I think a lot of people thought, okay, well, we're not going overseas this year, or we're not spending money on other things that we normally would. We would like to help those areas. But now we're sort of at a standstill too, because it's showing in consumer confidence too. People are, lacking that confidence to make those bookings now.
Look, and the confidence is so important. And we've talked many times about buying local, and it's great to see Australians really did go out and have a green, golden local Christmas. It was absolutely fantastic. But we need to continue to think about that in terms of having to spend money. Where do we spend our money? And then we need to see the states and the federal government have a much more consistent, simple approach to things like contact tracing, putting rules in place and sticking with them rather than at any moment they can change them. We've just seen the fiasco in the last 24 hours over the so-called traffic light system and then getting a permit if you wanted to come back into the state of Victoria. It's now like you need to have a separate passport if you're a Victorian effectively, but they go out and say something and it's available, it'll be available at a certain time, and it's still not available a few hours later. It looks like they're making it up as they're going along.
Yeah, well, it is. It's quite hectic. And Aaron Young, who obviously here, our founder at Ticker, he went through that same experience last night. He was supposed to be getting on a flight. He knew he needed the permit, and the website is essentially saying, this isn't ready yet, check back in a few hours. And it's created absolute pandemonium. We were just talking a little bit before. I've just returned from WA, and they have a central app called Safe WA that when you go to a venue, you sign in. There is one app that has your details, and you just sign the QR code. It goes ding, done. So you're not standing there for 10 minutes trying to put your details in and having venues check if you've done that. How do we not still have simple things like this in place nationally across the board?
Look, it's a great question. And, at Small Business Australia, we're big believers in having things be simpler and be fairer, and therefore they'll be better for small business people and for every Australian. But, there are elements of what each state has done that you say, look, that's best practice. Why can't we bring them all together and have one approach? So that app and the app at Service New South Wales, classic examples of it. Like, why are you having to put it in the left, right and centre? And I've watched people going into supermarkets and things. They're not scanning the QR codes.
Yeah.
It's too complicated if they're not on one simple system. Why would we need the permits if we had one centralised system that everyone was using? You could do contract tracing really quickly because it's all about the speed.
Yes.
I'll go home and stay home for a few days and go and be tested and wait until you get your results. No, maybe that's a double. I saw the Chief Health Officer of Victoria saying someone's just tested, but maybe it's a false negative. Well, what does that mean? Stop using all this mumbo jumbo. Let's have a simple, consistent system. Let's have some leadership from the Prime Minister so that we can get moving around and learn to live with the virus. Not avoid risk, manage risk and get on with our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people's livelihood really depending on it. Thanks for bringing us the latest updates, Bill. Appreciate your time.